BionicDance is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
The sad reality for the atheist movement is that it is bound to fail.
Bound to fail at what? Why do you think there's an atheist movement, and what do you think are its goals? Seriously, as an atheist, I want to know. Let's do this.
BionicDance's YouTube channel.
Greetings, fellow space travelers, BionicDance here. One thing that far too many religious people do is assume that they know atheism better than atheists. Their ideas about atheism are dictated to them by their religious bias, leading one to doubt that they've ever actually talked to a real atheist or cared about what was said if they have. And Mr. Bushy Beardy-Face Man is a rather blatant example of that sort of theist.
Actually, before we go to why is it bound to fail, let's go to what Darwinism would predict. Would Darwinism predict that we would all be materialists, or would it predict we would be people who are spiritualists, who look forward to a life to come, who care about others rather than selfishly caring about ourselves? Now, we all know the answer to that.
Evolution by natural selection is about genetics and unpredictable mutation, the ability to survive long enough to perpetuate the species through reproduction. So it probably wouldn't say a damn thing about religion or atheism. But there is so much to unpack here. For starters is the implicit assumption that not being religious means you'll be selfish, not caring about others, always out for number one, and that religion is the only way people will form a community, which is, crap. Part of human survival is forming a community for mutual benefit, and you don't need religion for that. Even if we are selfish, caring about our own survival means we're likely to see the benefit for ourselves in being part of the herd, that by helping others, we do help ourselves. And looking forward to a life to come, that's called growing up. Oh sure, he obviously means an afterlife, but that's hardly a survival trait. Bottom line, this guy has no idea what he's talking about, and he's obviously pleased with himself for it. A bright and shining example of Dunning-Kruger, of being too ignorant to know what you don't know, and thus thinking you know more than you do.
Essentially, it would predict that we would be atheists. We would be people that care about our own survival, our own reproduction, and it's about me, and every other type of good or every other type of behavior that we do, it's fundamentally for our own good.
That isn't how natural selection works, at least not with a communal species like humans. But this trope is so common among theists. They fundamentally misunderstand evolution by natural selection, and they love to call it Darwinism, like it is itself a religion, a replacement for theism. And we'll get to that later.
But if you actually look at the reality of the data, if we actually look at people all across the world, people want to connect with God. We have this spiritual thirst. I mean, even atheists write books on things related to spirituality, like Sam Harris recently, I think it's called Awakening.
First of all, Sam Harris is a complete tool, and do not try to reason from 1 to infinity, like one outspoken atheist speaks for all atheists. I, as an outspoken atheist myself, recognize that there are a double-wide buttload of ways to be non-religious, and that not everybody is going to agree with me. But I can say that there are a lot of atheists who feel no need whatsoever to connect with God, because we don't think God exists, and can happily live our lives without theistic belief. And he says God as if there's only one, but humanity has believed in many different gods throughout history. So careful, Mr. Bushy Beard-Face Man, your bias is showing.
I remember a few years ago I was in High Wycombe, and there was a college and we had to talk about Islam and faith, and there was this head teacher, and she claimed to be a spiritual atheist. I mean, what does a spiritual atheist even mean?
Let me tell you about something, Mr. Bushy Beardy-Face Man. There is this thing we've invented. It's called an internet. A magical thing where you can look stuff up and ask questions, and sometimes the answer you want is just moments away. That's kind of spooky, right? But it can be very useful for when we don't know something.
Look, guys, what it is that the reality of human beings is that we want to connect with God. We want to show our love, our gratitude, our worship to something. And if we don't end up worshipping God, we're going to end up worshipping something other than God.
I said we'd get to this later. One really common trope with theists is the assumption that everybody has a God-shaped hole in our psyche which has to be filled with something. If they can't get along without religion, then nobody can. And if those of us who are not religious happen to be big ol' fans of something, that is our God replacement. Whether it's atheism, being a fan of sci-fi or fantasy or sports or music or making money or anything else, they'll tell us that is your God. And shaking them loose of this idea, getting them to accept that God is a non-factor in our worldview, that the only reason we even address the topic is because theists won't shut up about it, that's a nearly impossible task. I know, I've tried. They're too invested in religion. It pervades every part of their lives, and the paradigm shift necessary to empathize with people who just plain don't need religion is one they just seem unequipped to even attempt.
I mean, look at what happened in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, no atheist should disagree with that because they got rid of religion, right?
Boy, they do love to bring up the Soviet Union, among other so-called atheist regimes. But once again, this is the something must replace religion problem. The assumption is that atheism replaced religion as an all-pervading worldview, that atheists start with the God question, and then every other idea regarding life, the universe, and everything is built around that basis of there being no God. That is, after all, how they build their own lives, around God. So everybody else must too, right? And then he tries to claim that no atheist can disagree with the Soviet Union, like the rest of their politics can't be odious to any atheist. Further, the analysis by Christopher Hitchens shows that Stalin, who studied religion extensively, simply rebranded the more brutal versions of Christianity, set himself up as the replacement deity for God, and used it to purge his enemies. And you're not going to find too many atheists who would do this or approve of it. The notion that an allegedly atheist regime is characteristic of all atheists is like saying that the jihadist terrorists represent all Muslims, something with which I think Mr. Bushy Beardy-Face Man would disagree.
So the fact is, you can't get rid of that worship instinct. You can't get rid of that spiritual instinct. You can't get rid of that drive that human beings have, what in Arabic in the Quran is called the Fitrah, the natural state that we were created in, that we want to worship God. And
I was never raised religious, and I have never felt the need to worship anything. I've had respect for many people and things, but I never worshipped them. I never had unfounded belief. Mr. Bushy Beardy-Face Man needs to step outside of his bubble, leave the echo chamber, and realize that his own experience is not representative of everybody's.
And I know this is going to be sort of sad news for the atheists, especially the lovely atheists on this YouTube channel, but that's the reality. That is the reality.
When they say it like that, gleefully and twice, that's when my BS meter goes into overdrive. That's when I'm pretty sure their audience is not who they're trying to convince.
It hasn't been the predominating, the dominating force in history, and when it was supposed to be taking off in the 20th century, it flopped, and we've got this new atheist movement, which, just like the movements in the past, will also flop.
Atheism isn't supposed to be a dominating force. It's not supposed to be a force at all. Atheism doesn't tell you to do or not do anything. Atheism isn't like a religion. You know all those religion-y things you do? We don't. Even if there is overlap in how we behave, we do it for different reasons. I know that's difficult to digest, but you need to learn it if you want to actually communicate with atheists instead of just the choir.
But Islam, as a spiritual force, will prevail. Why? Because regardless of how many doubts these atheists try and instill in believers, the spiritual state that we were created in, it will always tell us all of this is nonsense. There is a creator who is worthy of worship, and over time their intellectualisms will be uncovered as well, like it was in the past.
And I suppose all those Christians and Jews and Buddhists and Hindus and all those other religious folks, they're gonna join up with Islam too. This is another trope I see when theists start arguing with atheists, forgetting that their religion isn't the only one we don't believe, isn't the only one that exists.
And anybody who believes that atheism will prevail, I want to hear from you why you think it will, because if you look at the historical behavior of human beings, it is not something which is in line with what Darwinism would predict, and it is not something in line, if somebody wants to make a prediction, that atheism is actually going to be very prevalent.
We've already covered why most of that is bull, but if you look at human history, there are a lot of religions that have just gone away, relegated to the status of myth or legend. And there's no reason why yours might not be next. And if you look at recent polling data, atheism is very much on the rise, especially among the younger generations. But while it'd be great for religion to lose its stranglehold on the world, I've said many times that I just want to be left alone. I want religion to share and to play nicely with the other kids. That's all. If you want to believe goofy crap about magical sky men, you do you. Just leave me out of it.
If you look at Islam, it elevates the human being. The human being is there for something higher, for something greater. We have hope, we have love, we have this tremendous thing to look forward to in the hereafter.
And that doesn't make you suspicious. I mean, none of that is provable. Lots of religions make these same claims, and if any of them are right, it can't be all of them. And isn't it convenient that religion is there to make you feel important and to quell some of your worst fears? Boy, that sure is handy, isn't it? Alarm bells are ringing. This sounds too much like something humans would make up, and coupled with the need for faith to shore up all those missing facts, I'm just not buying it.
And at the end of the day, atheism will never make people happy. That's one thing, right?
And it's not supposed to. Atheism isn't like a religion. It doesn't serve the same function. I don't need religion. Lots of things make me happy. They just have nothing to do with any gods. Believe it or not, that is possible.
I mean, if you look at atheists, what do they have to offer?
Cake!
And atheists fundamentally aren't happy. They can claim to be happy, but they're not.
Well, how the hell would you know?
Islam, God teaches us that it is in the remembrance of God that hearts find peace. And the very purpose of life is to actually worship God. And it's through that worship that we are actually going to find that true spirituality, that true ultimate happiness that we're looking for.
Well, isn't it convenient that the book which supports the religion that happens to be predominant in the region where you live says the very thing you think you need to be happy? That sure was a lucky break. And any other religion from some other part of the world which happens to say the same thing, well, they just got it wrong, didn't they? Obviously.
And that happiness which atheism fundamentally cannot ever provide, which is why it's going to fail and Islam is going to prevail.
Again, atheism isn't like a religion. If anybody gets happiness from being an atheist, it's probably because they're not under the thumb of some oppressive theistic community. And again, this isn't some contest between Islam and atheism. Even if atheism goes away, there are still a ton of other religions out there who are quite convinced that this world is theirs. That's a lesson Mr. Bushy Beardy-Face Man desperately needs to learn. Okay, before I go, a little bit of business. First, I want to give thanks to DB Cisco for sending me this graphic novel off my Amazon wishlist. Link in the description, hint hint. It's called The Return of Zeta the Space Girl, and it's the third and I believe final chapter in the Zeta the Space Girl series. It says in the bio of the author and artist that he has 3 daughters, and honestly, I think it shows. A lot of it reads like he asked them for plot and characters. I'm actually not sure what age group this is intended for, because it has some fairly mature themes in it, but at the same time it reads like a fairy tale in outer space. Regardless, if you know me at all well, you know why I had to have this when I saw it on the shelf. Next bit of business, and I've been avoiding saying this, but the fact is that the YouTube atheist community, those of us making videos, are getting seriously spanked by YouTube. All of my videos are being instantly demonetized within minutes of being uploaded. Every last one. And I know it's not only me. Now, there are ways around this. The rules used to be that they wouldn't manually review and hopefully approve a video until it had at least 1,000 views in the last 7 days, which meant you'd be missing out on most of the ad revenue while you waited to get those views. Now, if you have enough subscribers, I vaguely remember them saying 10,000, but I'm not sure, then you can leave your video as unlisted and they will review it before release, which will take a day or 2. And even then, I'm lucky to make $100 a month from ad revenue. YouTube money sucks. That's why I use Patreon, and thanks to generous donations from my viewers, I've been able to make YouTube my career. And yet, I still make less than minimum wage, even with Patreon. I'm only able to keep my head above water because I'm not paying for housing, which is a story for another time. I've got Patreon set up on a per video basis. You only pay when I put out a vid, and you can limit how many videos per month get a donation. So if you can only spare a buck every 30 days, well, I'd still appreciate the assist. But no obligation. I'm gonna keep putting out videos regardless, and this is probably the only time I'm gonna mention it that isn't in animated outro form. Up to you. But either way, thanks for watching, and until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. For starters is the implicit assumption that not being religious. Evolution by natural selection is about genetics and an unpredictable. I went too fast. Atheism isn't.
You know, Dewey, we wouldn't have to do this if I had more Patreon patrons. Just saying. Every time you rate, an angel loses its wings.